Welcome to The Way the World Works, where the trusted team behind the Tuttle Twins books tackles current events, hot topics, and fun ideas to help your family find clarity in a world full of confusion.
Hi, Katie.
Hey, Brittany.
I think one of the themes that we talk about a lot, not only on this show, but I think all throughout like the Tuttle Twins community, is the importance of community itself. Like why that is so important. And really it's the anecdote to the government, if you think about it, because
Mhm.
communities can solve so many of these problems that the government thinks they're responsible for, right? Like the welfare state. Think of all the amazing acts of individual and private charity that happens within communities, churches, and even neighborhoods who pull together. There used to be something called barn raisings? Do you know what barn
Uh-huh.
raisings are?
Yeah.
Where like a barn would like burn down and people would come and rebuild it. Like it would be a community thing. Everybody would come, they'd have like music on, they'd have like a good time with it. And
Mhm.
that used to be your lifeline. That used to be what your insurance, what ensured that you would be okay if something went wrong. So we've talked a lot about communities here, but I want to talk about the most important community of all, which is one of the actually probably the smallest community you can probably have, and that is the family. And I wanted you, Katie, you found a really good quote, and so I wanted you to read that to open it up with, if you're ready for that.
Yes. Okay. So this is by Michael Novak, who was a theologian and a professor, I think. And he says between the omnipotent state and the naked individual looms the first line of resistance against totalitarianism, the economically and politically independent family.
And what does that mean, Katie?
Right. So I guess a simplified way of saying it is that the family is the first line of resistance against any type of um, control or overreach by government, right? So, and we're not talking about like at the point where there are soldiers at your door trying to take you away for having the wrong beliefs or for being the wrong race or religion, like has happened in other countries. But it's talking more, I think, about what do we teach our kids? Do we raise people who submit to because they don't know that their rights are being infringed on, or do we raise people who have a critical mind to be able to think and reason and decide for themselves what is true and right and good? And so the family unit stands as the first line of defense against any kind of totalitarian reach.
And I think that's so perfectly put, because it's the truth. It is your last line of or not your last line, your first line of defense. It's your army, really, so to speak, when something
Mhm.
goes wrong. And that's why it's so sad when people don't have that. I think it's very tragic, and not everyone does, and some people are have it to varying degrees. But family in general is irreplaceable. And one thing that is scary to me is I think we've seen over time that there are political institutions and public institutions that try to belittle the family. I don't know, have you noticed that, Katie, or if I'm way off base here, but that's something I personally noticed.
Yeah, no, I don't think you're off base at all. I think Connor actually talked a few weeks ago. I think he did like an Instagram reel maybe where he was talking about how, all of these dystopian movies, something that they always have in common is that children are separated from parents. Like either they're, born in kind of pods or in this weird, setting where there just is no parent, or they're in some other way separated from their parents. And I think that that's by design, right? So the last thing that anyone wants who's trying to unrighteously exercise dominion over another person is for that person to have a strong family unit, or for a child to have a strong bond with their parents. I think we've seen it in recent years with activist teachers who feel very comfortable talking to their students about their parents, saying things like, well, if you can't go to your parents, I'm your parent now. Um, I saw this thing going around on social media. I think it was like back during 2020. And it was something that all these teachers were putting on their doors. And it was like, um, if you can't talk to your mom about something, you're safe here. I'm your mom now. And I'm like, that is the most insane thing for a teacher to ever think. Like, how did we arrive here? Because that's so degrading to the parent and to the family unit. And I think about, like, when you start thinking late middle school, high school kids, those kids already are going to naturally be looking for ways to be at odds with their parents. It's just
Yep.
something that happens, and it kind of needs to happen because it's a way that we become adults, right? We start to look around and question, and part of the things that we start to question are, oh, wait, my parent is just a person. And that means that sometimes they make mistakes. And that means that they might have some flaws. And suddenly kids become aware of those things. And that's okay. But it's something that families need to navigate. And part of that is parents, talking to their kids and saying, like, hey, I was wrong about this, or man, I really messed up there. I'm sorry. Can you forgive me? Like, that's a place where open dialogue comes in. But if you're sending your kids to school and their teachers are feeding that
Yeah.
doubt and that questioning, that is such a war on family that, I mean, and it seems like so many teachers that see themselves as activists, like, they're not even afraid that they're going to get caught doing it. They feel very comfortable being very open about undermining the role of parents, and that's pretty crazy.
And what goes hand in hand with that is that now, like, school hours have even gotten longer than when I was in school, and they're trying to get all these pre-K programs, and kids are starting school. I swear, school year even starts sooner than it used to, but it
Yeah,
feels like this is already happening. But then they also want kids to be with them longer.
right.
The state wants your kids as long as they possibly can throughout the day.
I know.
And oh, go on. Yes, please.
I was just one of the things that I've found stressful in talking to parents over the years is, because a lot of people don't homeschool their kids. Like, most of the world doesn't homeschool, and even though we've seen these, leaps in homeschooling numbers, especially since COVID, it's still most of the world doesn't homeschool, and that's fine. But what I think we want parents to really understand is that regardless of what setting your child is getting their schooling, parents still have a non-transferable obligation to be in charge of their child's education. And what that means is, if you're happy with your kids going to public school, that's great, but make sure that you are supplementing, adding, or correcting things that happen at school that maybe you don't agree with. Like, you don't have to just allow someone else to be the narrator of a child's worldview. And so something that I've seen um, happen often with parents is they're very dismissive, I think, of the reality of what that time apart looks like. It is so normal. Most parents came up through the same system. And so they don't always realize, I don't think, that it's like, yeah, but you went from school to school from this time to this time, and maybe you played sports or something. But now there are systems in place to where from the time that your child is 3 until they're 18, they can be at school from like 6:30 in the morning until like 5 o'clock at night. And
If
where
they have
does
after
that
school or sports, it could be longer.
yeah, so, like, where is the time that parents actually are raising and educating their children? It's hardly there, and I see parents say, like, "Oh, I have great communication with my kids." Like, we laugh at the indoctrination that their teachers try to pull or whatever. And I think that's good, but, you really just you shouldn't overestimate the influence that you have on your kids when you only actually see them, to put them in bed at night and take them to school in the morning, and then to ferry them to sports or activities on the weekends. Like, there are other people who are spending a great deal of time with the children in the world right now, and I don't know that trusting that is I don't know that that's a good situation.
No, which actually is a perfect segue into what I wanted to say next. And that is, and this was kind of a question for you on what you think people can do to strengthen their families. Because I think you have a good point that naturally, when you become teenagers, you're trying to like assert your independence, and a lot of different things are happening where you and your parents might not be on the best terms all the time. So, how, especially in those harder years, how can you strengthen the family unit with all the distractions and things around us trying to pull them apart?
Yeah, so I think it has to start early. Um, you're not going to be parents, I think, feel like they have to put on this hat that is infallible, where they can't be human in front of their kids, and their kids have to see them as like never making mistakes and never being wrong. And in my experience, we raised 7 kids, and everyone's an adult now except for our son who's 14. And we've been really fortunate to have really strong relationships with all of our kids, even as our teenagers have gone through rebellious times, difficult times, times when they were not making good choices and it was hard on the whole family. Like, prioritizing having honest lines of communication with your kids cannot be overrated. Like, nothing should ever be more important than your kids knowing that they can talk to you. And I think that that is part of being able to have that when your kids are teenagers comes from being honest and open with your kids as they're growing up. Like, why do we think that it's somehow us showing weakness when we apologize to a child because we, you know, lost our temper, or telling them, hey, I told you this, and then I wasn't sure about it. So I went back and looked at it and I was actually wrong. And here's what the truth is. Like, us being right all the time isn't nearly as important as our kids seeing us as people that they can trust, who will be honest with them. And I think that that's a big mistake that parents make, and one that's so easy to correct, because our kids want to adore and admire us. And it's so much easier when they know that we're going to be honest with them, and we're going to apologize to them, and we're going to treat them just, like they're people. Kids really crave that.
I think that's so well said. And it reminds me of an episode we did a long time ago that was that some of the most powerful words you can say is I don't know, or that I was wrong. And I
Yeah.
think that's for people of all ages, right? And I agree with you. As somebody, my parents never said that. And I always think the relationship would be stronger if they did, because
Hmm.
when I was a teacher, I made sure to say that a lot, that I'm not always right, and it was hard. I'll be honest. There were times I was like, oh, it's really hard for me to go up to this 9-year-old and be like, I was wrong when I made this argument. But you feel better after, and it does build a relationship and trust that is so important. So yes, thank you for bringing that up. So we will leave it at there, or at that. And please don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast. And until next time, guys, we will talk to you later.
Bye.
You've been listening to The Way the World Works. Make sure your family is subscribed and check out TuttleTwins.com for more awesome content.